The nerve center of this kind of testing is this sensor pad, and the technique for learning how to use this is quite simple. There are two modes, positive and negative. In this method there are only two answers. One answer is yes and the other answer is no. Basically, the yes answer is a blip, like that. It's clear, definitive, crisp blip, and you get it by pecking with your finger on the sensor. Now you keep your finger on the actual sensor. When you put in the force or the toggle, you don't raise your finger off, so your finger is on the sensor all the time. And then the other modality is the challenge, which is more or less negative. Anything that's not positive is negative, and the challenge is like this. When we're doing a challenge, you are putting in a force which is strong enough to bring the meter, to bring the dial up to the top, but not to bring it over the top. So you're hovering up at the very end of the scale, and this is the kind of sound you're producing. So you're dancing at the top of the scale, and it's a measured, even force you're putting in, and you're keeping the dial, you're keeping the needle here, the indicator needle, you're keeping it just up at the top. Just up at the top, but not crossing over. Now that's a challenge. That's a challenge. In my experience, it takes quite a few hours, maybe 3 hours of practicing to get this technique right. It's like when you're learning to drive a car. At first you have to think of everything you're doing. You press this, you don't press that, you let the pressure off here, and so forth. It must become automatic. And essentially you write plenty of noughts and crosses. That's a plus, that's a minus, that's a minus, that's a plus, that's a minus. Or another way of putting it is, that's a yes answer, that's a no answer, that's a no answer, yes, no. And this is how you do it. So the plus is a blip, and then a challenge. For the purposes of learning this, just do 6 pulses. And another one, and a plus, 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 minus, which is the same as a challenge, and a plus. So when you're doing your minuses and pluses, you're not measuring anything, you're just manipulating the machine so that your brain and central nervous system become used to this method. Because essentially what you're training yourself to do is to express no by anything less than yes. In other words, if the challenge doesn't go over the top, if it doesn't go over the top, it's a no. If you get a blip, it's a yes. Now, in the beginning part, where we're just teaching ourselves how to physically handle the machine, you're not measuring anything, you're just manipulating the whole thing, and you're just doing exercises. Later on, when we go into the real testing, then you will be stepping back, and you will let the machine and you will let the system dictate what kind of response you get. So if I'm testing to see which of these medicines the person needs, I'm using the machine and I'm going from one medicine to the next, and we'll say our patient is connected by a hand electrode at this point. So you're saying, you're putting in your challenge, and you're saying, is it this one? Is it this? Is it this? And maybe on the fourth we'll get a positive. And what you feel when you come to a medicine that is resonant with your patient, it feels as if the sensor softens. Your finger sinks into it and you get a blip. Now it's it's an unusual situation. It's unmistakable once you feel it, and it is very like in kinesiology, where the kinesiologist is pressing on a muscle and he is introducing various substances, and suddenly some substance that's introduced softens the muscle and the muscle sinks under the same pressure. What we are doing here is we're putting in a standardized pressure, a standardized challenge, but the holding situation is the challenge. So when I'm testing here during the day, I am mostly I'm in that challenge mode. Now the challenge mode is essentially where you're holding the indicator right up at the top of the scale, so that the slightest extra pressure on the sensor or any change will bring it over and produce a blip. It's like walking along the top of a cliff, so close to the top of the cliff all the time that a breeze, a slight puff of wind can push you over. It's that kind of subtle influence that you're picking up here. Now essentially what you are picking up is the resonance reflex. It's the resonance reflex you will see in the water diviner who walks across a field and suddenly finds the source of water and the rod is pulled downwards as if by a force. I have experienced that. It feels like an external force that suddenly grabs the rod and pulls it down. When you're doing this kind of testing, it's very similar. You're moving along, you're putting in your standardized pressure, and you come to a medicine that is resonant with the person and you get a blip. Unmistakable.